Hello. After we made 2001, I wrote a book, The Lost Worlds of 2001, about all the ideas we might have used but didn't. Well, now I've made 2076. That's a name we've given to the commercials I've done for our TV special, The Man in the Iron Mask. They open like this.
Sound 51.
This is the author of 2001, A Space Odyssey, the man who predicted telecommunications via satellite, Arthur C. Clarke.
The Bell system knows that I like thinking about the future, and the second century of the telephone has just begun. So, later in tonight's program, I'm going to stick my neck out and speculate about the future of telecommunications 100 years from now, in the year 2076. Technology is the key to the future. It can take us wherever we want to go. So tonight I'm going to talk about technology, about some remarkable engineering and technical achievements that may seem futuristic, yet are being applied to the phone system right now. And then at the end of the program, we show these scenes, shot in the ruined city of Moratuwa, the ancient capital of my adopted home, Ceylon, now known as Sri Lanka. Tonight, we've seen some of the fruits of technology, engineering advances that are keeping America's phone system the best in the world. But what of the future? What of the year 2076? To see the future, we must study the past. 500 years before Columbus, this was the ancient capital of Ceylon, one of the great cities of the world. Engineers and artists of genius labored here, men as brilliant as any alive today. But they lacked something that we now take for granted. They could not speak to each other beyond the range of a shout. Like almost all men before the 19th century, the builders of this city lived in a tiny, isolated world. And then, just 100 years ago, Alexander Graham Bell changed the whole pattern of society, and yet the communications revolution is only just beginning. Our grandchildren will wonder how we ever managed to run our world with such clumsy, primitive tools. For they will have face-to-face contact with anyone, anywhere on Earth, at any time. They will have instant access to all the visual arts of mankind. They'll be able to shop without effort, bank without paperwork, and get any news item without waiting, right in their own homes. And I can see our grandchildren communicating with their offices instead of commuting to them. What an enormous saving of time and energy. And much of the dreary routine work of today will be done by machines. And hopefully, ignorance will be banished on this planet. All the knowledge of mankind will be available at the touch of a fingertip through the global electronic library. We'll even approach the old science fiction dream of teleportation. You'll be able to send a life-size, three-dimensional image of yourself to anywhere in the world. All this is possible if people really want it. For technology is not an end in itself. It exists to provide us with what we want. It is our servant, not our master. It can immensely enrich and enlarge life on this planet. But what of other planets? Throughout man's history, he has looked at the starry heavens and wondered. Half a world away from these ancient ruins, this radio telescope is listening to the stars. Until now, men have talked only to men. But by 2076, before the telephone is 100 years older, we may have completed the ultimate long-distance call to our unknown neighbors across the gulfs of space. Just as in 2001, there was a lot of material left on the cutting room floor. After all, we only had so many seconds for commercials. So I thought you'd like to see some of the lost worlds of 2076. The rock fortress of Siguria, which means Lion Rock, is in almost the exact center of Ceylon and is one of the most awe-inspiring archaeological sites in the island. About 500 AD,
the King of Ceylon, Kassapa I, who had usurped the throne and killed his own father, built an extraordinary palace on the upper surface of this 600-foot-high isolated boulder. On its base, he constructed enormous pleasure gardens, and for about 18 years he reigned here, while his half-brother, who'd fled to India, gathered an army and came back, met him in battle and killed him. And then for centuries, Siguria was lost in the jungle and only excavated at the end of the last century.
One of the features of Siguria is an art gallery in which there were originally hundreds of beautiful maidens painted on the rocks. Only about 20 of them survived now. And this has been a tourist attraction for centuries. Siguria has fascinated me ever since I first saw it 20 years ago. And in fact, I'm writing a novel which I've called The Fountains of Paradise, which will take place at Siguria about 2,000 years ago and also 100 or so years in the future. On your 100th anniversary, you had a program about the first century of the telephone. And as you said then, it's a story without an ending. It'll be just the same at the second centennial, for the story of telecommunications is unlimited, both in time and in space.
Welcome back to the BMICH for the teleconference to be held with Washington via WorldNet. The panel in Sri Lanka will consist of His Excellency the President, Mr. J.R. Jayawardena, Dr. Stanley Kalpage, Dr. Arthur C Clarke, Professor Willie Mendis and Dr. Pierce. Let me now hand you over to the panelists.
The United States Information Agency presents an international televised exchange of ideas. Now, from our studios in Washington, D.C., here is your host, broadcast journalist, Jack Reynolds.
Good evening and welcome to WorldNet. Today, for a nationwide television audience in Sri Lanka and distinguished participants and guests at the Bandaranaike Memorial Conference Hall in Colombo, we present a special program on past and future achievements in the peaceful uses of space. Classified as mere fantasy a short time ago, satellite technology has transformed today's world. 25 years ago, a program like today's satellite video conference would have been impossible. But there was one man, a visionary, who anticipated this revolution in communications. Arthur C. Clarke not only predicted an accurate picture of telecommunication via satellite, but helped us understand its impact upon our world today.
25 years ago, it was impossible to pick up the sounds and images from one part of the world and beam them to another. But in 1965, satellite technology changed all that. With the ability to send orbiters into space, nations began witnessing major global events, whether it be war, peace, demonstrations, or milestones.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
As mankind pondered global events and the immensity of space itself, he was also sharing in the vision of Dr. Arthur C. Clarke, in whose writings this new era of communication was predicted over 40 years ago. Dr. Clarke has recently stated that this communications revolution is just the beginning. He made other predictions as well.
Ignorance will be banished on this planet. All the knowledge of mankind will be available at the touch of a fingertip through the global electronic library. We'll even approach the old science fiction dream of teleportation. You'll be able to send a life-size, three-dimensional image of yourself to anywhere in the world.
In addition to Dr. Clarke's vision of teleportation, he also shared his thoughts on what the next step will be for satellite technology.
I see that Comsat's already making a Earth station small enough to be carried as hand luggage, well, almost, about 70 pounds. And I think in the next decade, almost any businessman and journalist will have a small attaché case which he'll be able to contact his home office directly through satellites and be independent of any terrestrial communication system. And think how essential, how valuable this is going to be, particularly in the lesser developed parts of the world.
As his insights within the realm of communications continue, so do his projections on space. Dr. Clarke foresees the permanent colonization of the moon and also an international cooperative effort to explore Mars and beyond.
Until now, men have talked only to men. But by 2076, before the telephone is 100 years older, we may have completed the ultimate long-distance call to our unknown neighbors across the gulfs of space. All this is possible if people really want it. For technology is not an end in itself. It exists to provide us with what we want. It is our servant, not our master. It can immensely enrich and enlarge life on this planet.
Today marks a very special day in the remarkable career of Dr. Arthur C. Clarke, often considered the father of satellite communications technology and perhaps the best-known writer of science fiction in the world. For today is Dr. Clarke's 70th birthday. And at the age of 70, when most men have retired, Dr. Clarke remains more active than ever in exploring the frontiers of man's scientific capability and spiritual potential. Today is not only Dr. Clarke's birthday, it's also the day on which Sri Lanka's Arthur C. Clarke Center for Modern Technologies presents its annual award for outstanding contributions to the development of satellite communication technology. The Clarke Center, created in 1984 by an act of the Sri Lankan Parliament, was inspired by Dr. Clarke's vision of modern technology harnessed for the future benefit of all mankind. Today, through the very technology which was once only Dr. Clarke's dream, we're privileged to have joining us in Colombo the President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, His Excellency President J.R. Wardner. We're also pleased to welcome Professor John R. Pierce of Stanford University, a pioneer in the development of the ECHO and Telstar satellite systems, and this year's recipient of the Arthur C. Clarke Award. Professor Willie Mendes, Vice Chairman and Director of the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Modern Technologies and Vice Chancellor of the University of Moratuwa. Dr. Stanley Kalpage, Chairman of the Board of Governors of the Clarke Center, Secretary of the Sri Lankan Ministry of Higher Education, and the Chairman of the University Grants Commission. And last but not least, Dr. Arthur C. Clarke himself, patron of the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Modern Technologies and Chancellor of the University of Moratuwa. We'd also like to acknowledge the fact that here in our studio this morning is the Sri Lankan ambassador to the United States. Professor Wardner, would you like to say a few words this morning? President Wardner?
I wish to convey my greetings to Ambassador Dialris, the panelists, and the audience in Washington. I'm very pleased that this dialogue, using satellite communication technology, has brought us together, although we are actually separated by thousands of kilometers. It is a clear demonstration of the impact and benefit of communication technologies as envisaged by Dr. Arthur C. Clarke. I have directed that institution building be commenced in Sri Lanka in the modern technologies to guide the destinies of this nation in the coming decade and in the 21st century. The Arthur C. Clarke Center for Modern Technologies is one such institution, established also as a tribute to the vision of Dr. Arthur C. Clarke. I'm glad that the Arthur C. Clarke Center will be involved in the development of the International Space University. My government has accepted in principle to extend the fullest cooperation to this laudable venture and has appointed the Arthur C. Clarke Center as the national liaison for ISU. I'm also pleased that Dr. Arthur C. Clarke has proposed the idea of an international monitoring satellite to promote peace in this world. I fully endorse this idea and hope that all nations will accept this peacemaking device in space. Sri Lanka will make a total commitment to mark 1992 a meaningful international space year. I see space technology-led development activities as a potential means of alleviating the very serious problems facing the developing world. I wish, therefore, to commend the involvement of the International Space University with the Arthur C. Clarke Center in realizing the goals of the International Space Year in 1991. It is most fitting that a pioneering event such as this dialogue has been possible on the birthday of Dr. Arthur C. Clarke. I wish him a very happy birthday and will also take this opportunity of congratulating Dr. John Robinson Pierce, the recipient of the 1987 Arthur C. Clarke Award. Thank you.
President Wardner, Your Excellency, thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel here in Washington. First, Dr. Joseph N. Pelton, Director of Special Studies and Projects for Intelsat, the International Satellite Consortium. Dr. Pelton played a leading role in the organization of the Arthur C. Clarke Foundation of the United States and currently serves as its managing director. Mr. Todd B. Hawley, administrator of the International Space University, which opens its doors next summer to a select group of students from around the world. And Frederick C. Durant III, executive director of the Arthur C. Clarke Foundation of the United States and former assistant director of the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, welcome to WorldNet. I'd like to ask our Washington panelists to make a few brief remarks in honor of Dr. Clarke and Dr. Pierce. Mr. Durant, would you start?
First of all, happy birthday, Arthur, from myself, Pip, all the family, and your many friends who know that this special day was coming up. I saw Isaac Asimov last weekend in New York, and he asked me specifically to extend his very best wishes and mentioned that his 68th birthday was coming up 2nd of January. Dr. Pierce, I'd like also to just send my congratulations to you and for the lecture award that is taking place today, and the wonderful trip that you and Mrs. Pierce had on your way to Sri Lanka. The Communications Satellite Corporation of the United States, the American member of the International Satellite Corporation, is sponsoring this lecture series, and we're very pleased.
Dr. Pelton?
Happy birthday, Arthur. I recall that we are actually celebrating many anniversaries this year. We have the 30th anniversary of the Sputnik launch. We have the 25th anniversary of Telstar, and of which Dr. Pierce played a key role. And very soon we're going to have the 25th anniversary of CENTCOM, which really proved that the Clarke orbit really works. So it is a historic, important year, but I think it's most important and appropriate this morning to, first of all, congratulate both Arthur and John Pierce for their Hall of Fame awards. As the founding president of the SSP, I'm really delighted about that. And also to, of course, wish you a happy 70th birthday. I would just like to say, Arthur, that while this is an historic occasion, I did not really realize how historic it was until I was reading the Washington Post last Sunday, and some remarks by Raul Sagdayev of the Soviet Union, who was talking about International Space Year, and he said, quote, "Finally, let us aim to put an American and a Soviet on Mars. My sentimental goal would be to do it by the year 2001. Let's make it a space odyssey, as suggested by Arthur C. Clarke. He has assured me that he will stay alive in good shape until then. But perhaps a more realistic goal for landing men on Mars would be 2005. So you can see, Arthur, we have at least quite a few more years of historic events to look forward to because you've already obligated yourself. I would just like to close by asking you a favor. This Saturday, about 1,000 employees of Intelsat will be gathered, and if you could return some greetings, Christmas greetings from Sri Lanka to the Intelsat staff, that would be greatly appreciated. And also, when you do so, if you could speculate where you think Intelsat and space communications will be 70 years from now, that would be even better.
Mr. Hawley?
Yes, it's my pleasure representing the International Space University to convey great thanks to President Wardner for his kind comments at the opening of this program in regards to International Space University. To Arthur, I send happy birthday greetings both from myself and the other two founders of ISU, Peter Diamandis and Bob Richards. We hope you enjoy your birthday very much and hope you get our card. To Dr. Pierce, congratulations. It's an exciting period, I'm sure, for you to be visiting Sri Lanka and giving the speech, but also, I think, looking back upon your distinguished career, it is certainly something which we at the International Space University hope to use as a symbol of the type of work that young people today entering into space careers might see as a long-term goal for themselves. To be able to contribute so much over their period of career time would be outstanding. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you all very much. And now let's begin our discussion with the International Space Year, which will take place in 1992. The International Space Year will coincide with the 500th anniversary of Christopher Columbus' historic voyage of discovery and the 35th anniversary of the International Geophysical Year, which ushered in the space age. Dr. Pelton, could you tell us a bit about the purpose of the International Space Year and the planning and activities that are associated with it?
Well, the purpose of International Space Year is to try to bring the benefits of space applications and space sciences to planet Earth in a new, more internationally packaged and internationally cooperative way, and to do so in such a way that the efforts of various countries around the world can better reinforce one another. In many ways, the International Geophysical Year is considered a model for the ISY activities, but it probably will be somewhat different in that there may be more national programs that are organized on a national basis, but there will be an attempt to standardize or integrate them in such a way that there is the maximum scientific benefit. The Soviets so far have proposed up to 12 projects for ISY, which they can see being carried out on either a joint basis or on a cooperative basis. And these range from joint Mars missions to plasma experiments to very long-range interferometer type experiments to plasma studies and so on. There was a conference in Hawaii a few months back in which a very large range of activities were proposed and suggested, and there are a series of other planning conferences that will give greater focus and definition to the activities. It is some concern that there is a lack of major new funding sources available in the United States and elsewhere, and this will be one of the prime activities, is to try to solidify a funding base as well as to define the many excellent programs for international cooperative activities that range from new satellite communication, telehealth, and telemedicine activities to other application programs to a wide range of scientific and exploration missions.
Thank you. Dr. Clarke in Colombo, would you like to comment on the significance of the International Space Year?
Well, certainly, but first of all, I would like to express my appreciation of the nice things you've said to me, and my best wishes to my good friends. I could see it on the screen in front of me, particularly Fred and Todd and Joe, and this is really a memorable occasion. I feel a bit guilty in causing so much trouble to so many people simply by staying alive for 70 years, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I hope you are too. Incidentally, Joe, my best wishes to Intelsat, and on Saturday, Dr. Pierce and myself will be lying in the sun on a beautiful beach soaking up the warmth, so you probably won't be having quite such a nice time. Well, the International Satellite Year, Space Year is, of course, a very ambitious project, and I hope it will focus the attention of the world on the outer universe in a way that the International Geophysical Year just started to do. But this will, I think, make people realize that the Earth is only our first stepping stone, in fact our cradle to the rest of the universe, and it'll be the next stepping stone into the solar system.
On the campus of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts, an enormously exciting new kind of university is taking shape. The International Space University will admit its first class of students this coming summer. Mr. Hawley, how does the International Space University differ from the traditional university, and what role do you foresee for it?
Well, the International Space University was founded by a very small group of people who I think shared the vision of people like Arthur C. Clarke, Dr. Pierce, and also had the assistance of such great leaders as several people here in the United States and Canada, as well as other representatives who came to a founding conference we held in April. That was held at MIT, and in fact, as you mentioned, our first summer session will also be taking place at MIT. MIT, of course, is only the University of Moratuwa of North America, as Arthur might say. It's a terrific place to be able to start such an institution, though, because it's already an international center of learning. What ISU will be doing, though, is each year following 1988, when we hold our first summer session, it'll be a roving campus going from place to place all over the globe, such that by 1992, with the International Space Year, we hope to inaugurate full-year format coursework, and that will be, I think, the one of the most solid activities that comes out of the 1992 space year, other than perhaps actual space missions. And then I think starts to show that International Space University will become a true global center. Certainly the initiatives such as that being put together in Sri Lanka to become permanent site for the International Space Year in 1992 and beyond is something that we really had not anticipated happening so quickly. And we also see that as the type of vision that's driving this institution much far beyond those small dreams the founders had over 2 years ago when we started it.
Dr. Kalpage in Colombo, would you care to comment on the International Space University and its importance for a developing nation like Sri Lanka?
Yes. As His Excellency the President of Sri Lanka, who incidentally is the Minister of Higher Education, has already said, the Sri Lankan government has approved in principle Sri Lanka's participation in the International Space University. The Arthur Clarke Center will be the liaison center for the ISU. We have already taken action to invite applications to select a Sri Lankan nominee for the MIT summer session of ISU in 1988.
Tadaholi, I am Professor Mendes from the University of Moratuwa. I am extremely glad that the Arthur Clarke Center has now taken active interest in participating in the ISU body. We wish to acknowledge the contribution provided by our own ambassador for Sri Lanka in the USA. And already in Sri Lanka, there is wide interest by many Sri Lankans to participate in the MIT summer session. We are also glad at the Arthur Clarke Center in Sri Lanka that your curriculum is going to be multidisciplinary in character, and we look forward to a very successful MIT summer session.
Yes, Mr. Durant, can you comment on some of this?
Well, I think the International Space Year, or ISY, is a very exciting concept, and I'm particularly interested in and delighted that around the world, and particularly Soviet Union and Japan and other spacefaring nations, the ESA, all are interested in development of the ISY. I believe the International Space University offers a great opportunity for international study and for communicating the exciting possibilities in research during this 1992 period. But there's also an opportunity for a much wider educational process on a global basis of science and technology relating to the ISY, or the many projects that I think will evolve for that period. Certainly the application satellites that use their unique vantage point in space in Clarke orbit for communications, weather, Earth observation, and so on. These are just part of the exciting stories that can be told and should be told for the education and information of the world.
Thank you, Mr. Durant. Professor Mendes, do you have a comment on that from Colombo?
Well, we are extremely glad that Mr. Durant has mentioned that the advantages of ISY should extend global. And we at the University of Moratuwa have already commenced some initiatives with the Arthur C Clarke Center for Modern Technologies. And more than all, we are glad that Colombo could be a possible location for the ISU campus. Already, by combining with the University of Moratuwa and the Arthur C Clarke Center, there is a trinity that can derive reality to the kind of global advantage of ISY that Mr. Durant spoke about. And I think it is also an opportunity, if the ISU campus is in Colombo, for its benefits to be shared by students, researchers and others in Asia and the rest of the region close to Colombo.
Dr. Kalpage, do you have some comments that you would like to add?
Yes, I am very glad that the ISU aims to develop a multidisciplinary curriculum, because this would give an opportunity for those of us in the developing countries associated with ISU to design a curriculum with the third world also in mind. And this would, I think, help to prevent large disparities in space-related development. For otherwise, developing countries would be at a distinct disadvantage in the 21st century. I therefore welcome ISU's decision to include participants from at least 100 countries at the MIT summer session next year.
Dr. Pelton?
I would just like to note some of the activities that I think have a direct relevance to the Clarke Center and the Sri Lankan interest in space. One of the proposals that has come forward at this point involving International Space Year is the possible sponsorship of a contest among the research and universities in developing countries to develop a small, low-cost Earth station appropriate for development activities. And one of the proposals that has been made that perhaps the Arthur Clarke Foundation in the U.S. as well as the Society of Satellite Professionals might co-sponsor, along with other groups, such a worldwide contest among the universities of the world, particularly in developing countries. Another proposal which has been made is that International Space Year should be used as an opportunity to, if you will, educate everybody on planet Earth about the benefits of space. And there have been several proposals made. Carl Sagan and Susan Eisenhower, the granddaughter of President Eisenhower, have both made several suggestions about how this might be accomplished. And we've been talking to various production groups about the idea of producing one or more global television shows with an audience of 1 billion or so. And we may ask Arthur for his help, as he did with the Day of the 5 Billion and several other productions done in the last few years. So these are attempts to take the technology out of just the laboratories of advanced countries and bring them more to everybody on planet Earth. And I do hope that that aspect of International Space Year, and to a certain extent the International Space University, will also achieve.
Dr. Pierce in Sri Lanka, could we have your comments, please?
Yes. I am very happy to be in Sri Lanka and to find the way in which our two nations share an interest in space, an interest in the Space University, and an interest in the International Space Year. We share a great deal. Right now, neither country is capable of launching anything into space with its own resources. Much as I admire Sri Lanka and wish them well, I hope that by the time of the International Space Year, or even before that, my nation will have achieved, or I should say regained, the ability to launch things into space, because I'm a patriotic American, and I think that we should excel Sri Lanka in something.
Hawley, do you have a reaction?
Well, in fact, I agree with a lot of the comments that have been coming over the satellite beam here. I think one of the most exciting things about International Space University's reception by the world has been in the third world, in developing nations, that not only has Sri Lanka taken an interest in the first year, but they've taken an active interest in guiding this institution as it develops. Other countries also, the People's Republic of China, Kenya, are sending students to the first session of ISU. And I think that reflects, as people have mentioned, this multidisciplinary approach now to outer space that really is essential. We've moved beyond just rocket technology as the center of the space activity. Certainly the satellite industry has spun off a whole bunch of new space careers, including space law, space management, this sort of thing, which had not existed even 15, 20 years ago. Now these are careers that students can go into, and through the International Space University, we hope to have a center for bringing those like-minded students from around the world to study together, I think to gain a new picture of what the world is really like, and to go away and accelerate their nation's activities related to outer space and high technology in general. And I'm actually very thrilled to be hearing the comments that have been coming through about International Space University today.
Let's continue this fascinating discussion on the peaceful uses of space technology by touching on Dr. Clarke's proposal for the launching of an international monitoring satellite. Such a PeaceSat, as Dr. Clarke likes to call it, could serve as a watchdog for the world to guarantee international peace. Dr. Pelton, as an expert in the field of satellite technology and the administration of international satellite systems, could you comment on the proposal for such an international monitoring satellite?
Well, there are two aspects of that issue. The first part is the easy one. Is it technically possible to build and deploy such a system? And the answer to that is obviously yes. The question is it politically possible to do that at this time? And I'm afraid that the answer that I would make, and also I talked to John McLucas, who could not be with us today, and his answer was the same, that we do not see that it's likely that that's going to be happening in the near-term future. There are at least 3 different types of concepts for monitoring technology today. One is sometimes called MediaSat, where you would have a sensing device that could be used essentially to support news operations, such as was used by the networks to cover the Chernobyl disaster. The second approach is monitoring for economic and resource type of activities from fishing, agriculture, and timber. And that, of course, is happening, and the spot technology has become very good, and the resolution is very high. And it seems to me most likely that evolving from MediaSat and Earth resource technology such as we have with SPOT, we can, in time, maybe by the end of the century, be able to move forward to move to this third stage of peace monitoring and the ability to achieve that type of political cooperation based on the rather remarkable breakthrough that's been achieved with the INF treaty here in Washington just a week ago. So I think the idea is a good one. I think the prospects are good, but I also have the feeling that we are a decade or so away, which I guess with Arthur Clarke is very good, because usually his visions are 20 to 30 years ahead of the time rather than 10 to 15.
Thank you, Dr. Pelton. Now to Colombo for some comments by Dr. Clarke.
Well, first of all, I'd like to make it clear that the International Monitoring Satellite was originally an idea of the French government and has been heavily promoted by Howard Kurtz here in Washington, and I'm grateful to him. I would like to, if I may be allowed, to make a brief commercial. And let me quote a passage from Odyssey 3. The age of transparency had dawned in the 1990s when enterprising news media had started to launch photographic satellites with resolutions comparable to those that the military had possessed for decades. The Pentagon and the Kremlin were furious, but they were no match for Reuters, Associated Press, and the unsleeping 24-hour-a-day cameras of the Orbital News Service.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clarke. And now we'd like a final comment from President Wardner.
I'm happy that this global dialogue was made possible. I would like to help Professor Pierce to enable his country to excel us in something. This is a sphere in which we can all cooperate. Thank you, WorldNet, for facilitating this teleconference. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. As we conclude today's program, I'd like to congratulate Dr. Pierce and send our own very happy birthday greetings to Dr. Clarke. And thank you to all our participants in Colombo and in Washington for a stimulating discussion. As a reminder, credit for today's program should be given to WorldNet, the television service of the United States Information Agency, and Rupavahini, the national television network of Sri Lanka. In Washington, I'm Jack Reynolds for WorldNet.
Thank you.
You have just witnessed a live teleconference from Washington on the occasion of the Arthur C Clarke Award and Lecture Ceremony in honor of this year's recipient, Dr. John Robinson Pierce. The occasion was